The Occupy trio will give themselves up to the police tomorrow. The CE describes the call for Mongkok occupiers to move to Admiralty as worrisome. And Canada to launch a new immigration scheme for investors. Good evening. The three Occupy Central organizers have announced that they will surrender themselves to the police tomorrow for taking part in unauthorized assemblies. They also urged all occupiers to retreat from the streets, a call made on day 66 of the Occupy protests. But some protesters are beginning to gather in Mongkok. Some shops have closed as a result. Dainto reports.
The three who came up with Occupy Central with Love and Peace explained their decision today.
We are not abandoning the occupiers, and we just urge the occupiers to consider the importance to or the understanding that the fight for democracy is a long battle. We should reserve all our energy in order to have a better chance that we could get democracy for Hong Kong in the long run.
The Occupy trio, Professors Benny Tai, Chan Kim-man and Reverend Chu Yu-ming, will be turning themselves in at the Central Police Station at 3 p.m. tomorrow, under the possibility that they've contravened Section 17A of the Public Order Ordinance, which covers unauthorized public assemblies. They called supporters to join them in surrendering, saying it's a demonstration of commitment and responsibility to their use of civil disobedience to fight for justice. The organizers said they could potentially admit to other offenses, such as inciting others to join such assemblies, depending on how the prosecution would go ahead with it. Chu Yu-ming was emotional in expressing his concern for the safety of the demonstrators. Condemning the government for doing nothing to solve the problem but sending the police to tackle the protesters, the trio urged the occupiers to retreat from the streets. They added that the Occupy marshals, medical and legal teams will decide on their own whether or not to continue their volunteer work. But they stress this is not the end of the fight.
To surrender is not to fail. It's a silent denunciation of a heartless government.
Benny Tai and Chan Kim-man are moving the action into other directions, which includes engaging the community to further promote education on democracy and human rights. They also hope to draft a social charter to protect civil society's core values. Diane To, TVB News.
There has been a range of reactions to the Occupy trio's decision. Rani Samtani has more.
Secretary for Security Lai Tung-kwok said this afternoon that police will handle those who turn themselves in accordance with the procedure. He also welcomed the Occupy organizers' call for protesters to retreat from the streets, a view echoed by pro-establishment lawmakers.
It really caused a lot of people inconvenience. Yeah, I think it's about time to stop doing it. Okay, and this is a wise thing to do.
The Labour Party said it respects the trio's decision to turn themselves in.
But for the Labour Party, we would still stay on in this umbrella movement. And I think because we believe that now it's time to discuss about the direction of the movement and not really handing in ourselves. But if one day, the movement is over and we are still not arrested, I have already promised that I will hand in myself.
The Civic Party and the Democratic Party agree. Democratic Party legislator Emily Lau said it is important, however, to consider how the movement can further engage the community.
And I'm sure they will continue to be part of the movement, and my party will be very, very happy to continue to cooperate with them, and I wish them all the best. And some of my colleagues will accompany them to go to the police station tomorrow.
But People Power is against the call on occupiers to retreat.
This decision to urge the student to withdraw is totally unwarranted, and also it's not a proper one. Mainly this is a students-led political movement, and it should be continue to be led by the students. I do believe we should provide all kinds of support, including moral, physical, and also direct support, to the student in the coming days, because it is at the, it is at the worst time since the start of the movement.
Earlier this morning, Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying said the call for Mongkok occupiers to move to Admiralty is a worrying situation. He said that many have noted the complicated backgrounds of the Mongkok occupiers. Speaking before the weekly Executive Council meeting, the CE called the protesters' fight futile because genuine universal suffrage can only be implemented in accordance with the Basic Law and the National People's Congress Standing Committee's decisions. But Joshua Wong of the student group Scholarism, who is now on an indefinite hunger strike, refuted Leung's dismissal of their protest efforts and reminded people that it's the government's responsibility to resolve the political impasse.
We hope the general public focus more on the reason for why CY Leung did not respond to our request, rather than just focus on whether the Occupy action will continue.
Ronnie Samtani, TVB News.
Meanwhile, the High Court has rejected the bail condition appeals of 4 Occupy protesters accused of obstructing bailiffs during the clearance of obstacles in Mongkok last week. Owen Feng reports.
Among the 4 appellants are Deputy Secretary General of the Hong Kong Federation of Students Lester Shum and People Power member Tam Tak Chi. They were arrested in Mongkok last week during the execution of injunction orders and then brought before the court. A magistrate banned them from entering a designated area in Mongkok except in transport or in transit as one of their bail conditions. Today, High Court Judge Derek Pang upheld the magistrate's decision and rejected their appeal. In his judgment, Mr. Justice Pang stated that the occupation movement is ongoing. And since the execution of the injunctions, the judge continued, sporadic protests have spread to an area much larger than that of the original blockades in Mongkok. And he believes there is a risk that the defendants will commit a fresh offence, necessitating the bail condition. The judge is also satisfied with the banned area being larger than the areas covered by the injunctions, stating that most of the arrests since the execution of the court orders were made within the banned area. The High Court judge further highlighted that there is no pressing need for the defendants to enter the banned area except for the purpose of travelling.
I'm really disappointed about the judgment.
Shum added that he'll abide by the bail condition and will be cautious when he's around Mongkok. Meanwhile, another defendant, Tam Tak Chi, said he'll find other ways to protest.
I cannot go to the Mongkok district, but I can go to Yau Ma Tei, Jordan and Tsim Sha Tsui. I will call for action.
The defendants will not be able to appeal against the High Court's judgment, and the only option left is judicial review, which they said they'll not be pursuing. This means that there won't be any further legal proceedings until the hearings in January. Owen Feng, TVB News.
According to media reports, Canada will be launching a new scheme that will allow foreigners to invest to get residency in the country. Stephanie Choi has more.
Here's hope for those looking to move to Canada. The Immigration Investor Venture Capital Fund pilot project may allow qualified individuals with 1 to 2 million Canadian dollars to spare to immigrate to Canada. That's about 6.8 to 13.6 million Hong Kong dollars. Canada did away with this 20-year-old immigrant investor scheme earlier this year because it's been thought the 800,000 Canadian dollar investment sum undermined the value of permanent residency in Canada. According to the Wall Street Journal, the Canadian government hopes to raise 136 million Canadian dollars through this new scheme, but immigration authorities say they're still looking into details. The aim of this pilot project is to attract wealthy overseas individuals, particularly those from China, to immigrate to Canada. A local immigration consultant says although the minimum sum of 1 million Canadian dollars is much higher than the previous 800,000, he doesn't think it will put off people from Hong Kong and the Chinese mainland. 1 million Canadian dollars isn't a problem to many Hong Kong or mainland Chinese, he says. Compared with places such as the UK and Australia, which have large investment capital requirements, the increase in Canada's scheme won't make much of a difference, he adds. Canada will also be launching the Express Entry system next month that will process applicants based on their skills and experience to contribute to the country's economy and labour markets. The applications of chosen qualified foreign nationals will be processed within 6 months. Stephanie Choi, TVB News.
Former British Prime Minister Gordon Brown announced he will stand down as a lawmaker at next year's national election after 32 years in Parliament. Alan Buknia reports.
Brown made the announcement Monday during a speech in his hometown of Kirkcaldy in Scotland.
But I'm in no doubt that it's the right thing to do. A new person with new ideas, a new vision, new insight, new energy to represent this constituency and to stand for us as the Labour Party at the next general election.
Brown had a checkered career in British politics. He spent 10 years as finance minister under Tony Blair's Labour government from 1997 before winning the top job in 2007. He won praise for his handling of the 2008 financial crisis. His quick bailout of banks and economic stimulus prevented the UK from going into the deep recessions experienced by many other European countries. But by 2010, he ranked as Britain's most unpopular prime minister in half a century, leading the Labour Party to its worst defeat in a generation.
Common defence, common currency.
Brown made a comeback in popularity in September's Scottish independence referendum, being credited with saving the Union by imploring voters to stay in the United Kingdom. The announcement of his resignation from politics was widely expected. Some had thought he'd retire after the referendum, but he said he wanted to stay on to make sure the changes promised to the Scottish Parliament were followed through.
I wanted to be absolutely certain that these changes would happen and that the new Parliament would be in place before I made the decision to stand down as a Member of Parliament. And even after a week of speculation, when it's a strange experience to read your obituary even before you've retired.
Brown is currently a United Nations Special Envoy for Global Education and has worked closely with teenage campaigner Malala Yousafzai. Alan Bucknia, TVB News.
U.S. President Barack Obama is pledging to address the upheaval sparked by the police shooting of a black teenager in Ferguson, Missouri. He introduced the multi-million-dollar Federal Reserve initiative. James Aiken reports.
The announcement comes in the wake of a grand jury decision not to charge the white police officer who fatally shot unarmed black teenager Michael Brown. A significant portion of the 3-year, $263 million